Hello, and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. This time, we're going to talk about electrical vehicles. And we have spoken about electrical vehicles over the past few years. But now I think it's come to a time where maybe literally every second vehicle or every third vehicle you see on the road has a green uh, number plate on it, signifying that it's a electrical vehicle. And I for instance just realized that in my locality there are at least two new charging stations, public charging stations, being built. So we are seeing the infrastructure come up, we are seeing people happily accepting the electrical vehicle, especially maybe in some parts of the country maybe you have access to your own parking space and all of that, but definitely the ecosystem is building up. And to talk more about this, we have with us Vivek Srivatsa, who's head of marketing, sales, and service strategy at Tata Partner Electric Mobility Limited, but Tata Motors in short. So, Vivek, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Vivek, can we start by discussing how has this entire ecosystem developed?
Yeah. So obviously, it has always been a chicken and egg story, with regard to the ecosystem. The most important part of the ecosystem is the charging infrastructure for the electric vehicles. And it was always a question of will the vehicles come on road first or the charging infra later. We kind of took that problem head on. Fortunately, within the Tata Group, we have a few companies who can, kind of get together and provide a lot of solutions for customers. So, with regarding to charging, we allied with Tata Power and said that let's not wait for public charging infrastructure to come in. And we took the decision to give a charger along with every electric vehicle that we sell, and also ensured that installation is done by ourselves. Usually, it's quite a at that point of time. I'm talking about 2020 when the first mainstream, uh, you know, personal use electric vehicle was launched in the form of Nexon. It was not easy for customers to liaise with their probably the apartment owner, the power supplier, and all that. So we also took care of all the liaising, the documentation, and ensured that the charger is installed at the customer's own parking lot. So that kind of solved the chicken and egg story, and of course that is as far as charging is concerned. But the other areas in terms of financing, in terms of assuring the customer about safety, all that also was taken care of. And now I think seeing, like you said, seeing a green number plate is not unusual, but similarly seeing a parking lot with a installed charger is also not very unusual.
Compared to what you see in other parts of the world, I remember being in Sri Lanka in 2019, and literally every petrol filling station had a EV charger also. And this is
Yeah,
when we were not even thinking about it in a way, right? And I
yeah,
was surprised. This is 2019, early 2019, in fact. And now, like, we are seeing the early days, but when you travel to the US, you would realize that every parking lot, literally every parking lot, whichever part of the US you travel to, has an allocated corner for EVs, right? And you have the entire ecosystem. If you're in a Tesla, it tells you that you have one on your right, one on your left, and your range and all of that. But how far away are we from that? Or again, do we have to think of this differently because our problems might be different? To give an example, I live in an apartment with 18 floors and 8 houses in every floor. Our So if we get a charger, how do we manage it? How do we manage the time taken? How do we manage the cost of the power? So do we have to think of this very differently, especially in urban areas like Delhi and Bombay, where you might not have a standalone house?
yeah. I think definitely we need to think uh, a bit differently compared to what Sri Lanka has implemented or even the United States. The big thing is about population or the potential number of cars that can come onto the road. Also, we are looking at possibly slower charge time and slightly more unpredictable power infrastructure. Uh, so one thing is clear is that highway charging is something we need to focus on. To some extent, the fact that we give install home charging solutions for with every car kind of takes care of the intra-city usage with our EVs giving real world you know uh, range in excess of 300 now, comfortably 3 or 4 days transit within us. Most of our cities are taken care of, but it's a highly charging infrastructure which is the bigger challenge for us. Uh, to install the chargers at probably the most convenient locations in terms of you know probably the midpoint between two cities or a point where people like to have a refreshment, finding a stable power connection there, finding a partner who will be able to provide charging space and also maintain you know the array of charges. These are the challenges we see in India, which is probably not such a big issue in slightly more developed countries. Uh, so, to a large extent, if highway charging is becoming predictable, and the key word is predictable, I would say, then a lot of issues will be cleared in people's minds in terms of electric vehicle transport. And the key to that, I would say, is like you said, every fuel station getting equipped with charging infrastructure as well. So you know that like I can stop for fuel, I can stop for charging as well. The oil companies have strongly, given statements that they will get into charging infra. I think it is also their own business continuity measure in the future, right?
Yeah.
20 years down the line, probably there might not be too many customers of oil, but there will be customers for charging. So it's only a question of when it is going to happen. While there are several startups coming as well who are looking at independent solutions, the scale and the predictability and the usability that we see by kind of fixing chargers in fuel pumps becomes very good and easy for a customer ease of use point of view. So I think both areas will develop. Startups will continue to give innovative solutions, standalone solutions, probably even higher and faster charging solutions. But oil companies can give a predictable, probably a larger array of chargers which is easy to park and also backed up by some other solutions in terms of poor options and all that. So I think these are the two areas which will be more suitable for India.
So how do you think this problem is going to solve? Is it going to be solved because companies like Tata is going to do their bit and other companies will do their bit? Or do you think, do you need like a sort of, a body that sort of
Yeah,
works
yeah,
together,
yeah.
ensures, maybe even the government is part of it so that, it brings in all the stakeholders, ensures that there is a timeline and like, we work towards it. Like, because there are so many players here, right? So how do you think that is going to shape up?
See, one thing is, with about in excess of 75% market share, and if you look at the pool of cars in the country, we are 80%. We
Yeah.
are the market to some extent. So and we are. I'm seeing that with a lot of humility because it gives us a lot of responsibility also to shape the market. Um, yes. So we have worked with Tata Power, and we have openly stated that we are willing to share data in terms of which are the routes, highway routes in the country where there's maximum movement of electric vehicles. Fortunately, we have our, vehicles are connected, and using telematics, we can, kind of give this data without infringing on customer privacy.
Hmm.
At a cube aggregate level, we can easily share this data. We can also share data where people are stopping often, all that, which is actually a gold mine of information. Considering there are 100,000 EVs already on the road of the country, this is very predictable data, and we are more than willing to share it. And in fact, in the next few days, we have a charging day convention being planned in Mumbai, 26th of October, where we are getting all the infrastructure players. You have the charging companies, we have startups, we have other two-wheeler companies, electric companies also joining us. So it's going to be uh, a big step into what you call the conglomerate kind of approach to solving the issue. While we have been pulling the load ourselves, I think the way forward is for everybody to come in together. From a purely customer point of view as well. Today, I don't know if I'm traveling on the highway, I don't know which is the charger that I'm going to get, which is the
Yeah.
charger going to be available or active. So I usually have 4 or 5 different charging apps on my phone. I think that's not very customer centric. Tata Motors is working on what we call as a super app, where we'll, with one app, we'll
Aggregator.
be exactly like an aggregator where we'll be able to, use any service provider. So these are areas we are taking additional onus as market leader to drive ease of use for customers towards charging infrastructure.
So before we get into the customer sentiment, but now one more thing I have seen is that you know uh, India being such a big country, you have different state governments which are at different levels of evolution, right? Like on how to tackle this problem. And I for instance see that Kerala has a lot of infrastructure which the government itself is pushing. Because KSCB itself has charging stations. They have, like, for two wheelers they have, like, charging points on electric poles. And I don't think other states are thinking like that. But so how, how do you get, like, even all the state governments to think on the same level, right? Because especially if you're talking about highway charging, you are moving,
Yeah,
like, if you are in NCR, you're technically moving through 3 to 4 states in an hour or so, right? And if each state has a different policy and different way of tackling the problem, then
yeah,
that itself is a hiccup.
absolutely. I think to get all state governments to think similarly, it's an impossible task. I don't think uh, Tata Motors or even the Tata Group is capable of achieving that. But I think what can solve the problem is to use companies, both private, public sector, who have a pan-India presence to work towards a uniform solution. And to some extent, I think state governments will are looking for solution, even though some states have taken the initiative of deploying chargers under the state power generation company by itself. But that doesn't give any benefit for the customer. End of the day, a charger is a charger, and as long as seamless usability is provided to the customer across states, uh, it is good enough. And it is more, I would say, the onus of pan-India organizations,
Yeah.
quasi-government organizations or private organizations to deliver a customer-centric approach, I would say. There are many other sectors which is state agnostic. Take the oil companies itself, or take a distribution network like what we have for Tata Motor vehicles, both I mean passenger vehicles or commercial vehicles. The experience is uniform, whatever state we are in. So we manage the state level differentiation in the back end, but for the customer, it will be common in the front end.
So, in the 3 years that you guys have been very active in this space in India, how have you seen the customer itself changing, right? Like, you had maybe the early mover kind of customers who usually are very receptive to new technologies coming in initially. But
Yeah,
now, I've been part of so many conversations where people are very actively thinking of their next car being an EV, right? Because they're very comfortable in their space to think about it. So how have you seen that sentiment change?
yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. You're right. The early customers were the absolute early adopters, uh, tech enthusiasts, I would say, who just have done a lot of research and know exactly what EVs are about. They know the mechanics and the chemistry of electric vehicles, and they've just were absolutely convinced. The other cohort which shifted very immediately were, you know, um, private entrepreneurs or businessmen for whom cost of operation was very important. They had the wherewithal to take that risk by investing in a EV, uh, but they saw that there was a huge amount of saving to be had. The more they ran the car, the more they could save. But since then, we have obviously introduced a lot of new products. We've substantially spread the price bandwidth as well. And all this is in an effort towards what we call as mainstreaming of electrification. Move away from those niche people who can be defined as early adopters, but probably get into other people who want to use it like a normal car. And we have seen more and more customers, uh, kind of changing their mindset. Today, I would say that a lot of uh, regular ICE customers are also looking at EV, but they look at EV as a tech solution rather than as an automotive solution. People are kind of expecting a lot more software in their car. I mean, we recently have started rolling out software upgrades which gave new features, and that's become de rigueur for these customers in terms of expectations. Obviously, the reliability, the ease of use of an EV is much more compared to the mechanical experience of an ICE. So, customer approach also changes accordingly. So, to summarize, I would say the EV customer uh, looks at a lot more standardized product. Um, I mean, he doesn't expect one product to be very different to another. It is almost like I would say like buying a tech product. Mhm.
Yeah.
And the kind of interventions, product upgrades the customer expects is also very different from an ICE. And most importantly, EV customers are willing to share their experiences, have constant dialogue with the manufacturers, which is just the opposite, I would say, in ICE customers. ICE customers say that I just want my car to be serviced and I don't want anything to do. If I speak to the manufacturer, means I have some problem. Whereas
Yeah.
side it's the other way around. They want to have constant dialogue. They want to know how to improve their experiences while driving. So I would say while the customer uses the product for almost the same reason, the mindset and the approach towards the manufacturer and the product is completely different. And to summarize, it's about EV seeing EV customers buy more as a tech product or a gadgetized kind of mindset compared to an ICE customer. That's the trend we are seeing.
So it's basically a smartphone with wheels, right? Like the
Yeah,
expectation
that,
is similar to
yeah.
what you would expect from a smartphone, right? Regular upgrades, hardware that lasts longer. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, I
Today
can
we are
relate
some
to that.
time away from really accepting that description because I think our cars still are not so smart. But yes,
Yeah.
we are definitely going in that direction, and it's good that customers have started expecting that as well.
Yeah. I actually saw that in the US in a Tesla, one of the most used apps is Netflix,
Yeah, yeah,
right? On the move, people like to watch,
yeah,
movies on the Netflix. And again, as you mentioned, the expectation is more aligned to your tech behavior than
yeah.
your on road, like being a petrol head kind of a behavior. That's interesting. Like experience of being inside an EV itself is very different, very different, right? Like I've been in a few taxi services. Like in Delhi, you have a taxi service that is only EV, and I prefer calling them if I need. But like I often ask the driver, have you started the car? Like you really don't, so is that also impacting how people are, maybe, because it's a much more comfortable, quieter, smoother ride, right, at the end of the day.
Absolutely, it is comfortable, quieter, smoother. We are seeing a lot of women take to EVs
Yeah.
because it's a much more comfortable space to be in, and it's just a little bit more easier to tackle the difficulties on the road, including traffic, road conditions.
Yeah.
Definitely, these are far more reliable, I would say, because the number of components are much lesser, and you don't have obviously, it is once you have charge, you don't have to stop on road to fill fuel, etc. You can come back home to top up, the charge. You don't need to stand in a line in the fuel pump. So there are a lot of softer aspects that are beginning to be appreciated. Apart from the tech elements, and we have seen increasingly that any customer, be it male, female, once they get used to driving an EV, they don't go back to an ICE. And
Yeah.
many of our customers we've seen the EVs bought as a second or even a third car in the household. Probably the first two cars are premium cars, but very soon we see that the EV becomes the default choice of everybody in the household
Mhm.
because it's just a overall smoother, easier, more advanced driving experience.
You also have a category of buyers who are making an informed choice, right? Also, they as in they want to be the people who who have moved to EV, right? Because of the impact on the climate and all of that. So is that still, is that becoming a thing in India? And I know it doesn't really make a lot of sense in the Indian market because we really don't have a lot of clean fuel even in the power space yet.
Yeah. No, I think definitely the environmental consciousness of moving to an electric car is one of the, I would say, in the top three reasons to buy an EV.
Okay.
Probably across the country, if you see, cost of ownership is the number one. But many a time we see, the positive impact on environment is number two. Many people we have seen started using solar power for their homes, and then driving an
Mhm.
EV just becomes
Yeah.
definitely the greenest option. Also, realize that moving towards cleaner power generation and moving towards EV are two parallel lines. You cannot wait for power generation to become clean and then start EV
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah.
It is a process. Probably it will take 10 years, 15 years, but you have to go together. And I think customers are, Indian customers are always very wise, and they realize that. And a popular uh, phrase we use within the organization is that most customers now realize that it is not a question of if they'll move to an EV in the future. It is about when. They
When?
know
Yeah.
sooner or later they have to get onto the electric bandwagon. Some of them even buy a last ICE engine car, saying that this is a sentimental car for me because after
Okay.
this I won't be going to a ICE.
Yeah.
Seen that. So that's the mindset we are seeing. But yes, largely very, very a high level of awareness in terms of environmental footprint, and many of them are making their own moves in terms of solar power and all that. The people do know also the power grid is slowly getting greener and greener, and
Yeah.
it's an important consideration. I would say.
So, Vivek, thanks for being on the show. Very insightful. Again, a lot of these angles we don't think about. We see the
Yeah,
EV on the road, or we sit in one, but we don't realize how it's actually a revolution that's happening in our country, right? Like maybe slowly, but it's certainly happening, and it's becoming more and more visible now. So,
thank
Vivek,
you,
thanks for
Shiva.
being on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Bye.
So, you were listening to Vivek Srivatsa of Tata. We'll be back again next week with more insight, more technology news, and a lot more information. Our podcast is available everywhere you listen to your pods.